Come closer for a moment, slow down. There is nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing you need to fix. Nothing you need to carry for anyone else during these next few minutes. Just stay here with me. Breathe. Let your shoulders soften. Let the part of you that has been holding everything together finally rest for a little while. Because I have a feeling you've been strong for so long that you've almost forgotten what it feels like to simply be held by understanding. And before we go any further, there is something I want you to know. I see you, not the version of you that smiles when people ask how you're doing. Not the version that says, I'm fine. Not the version that keeps showing up, keeps giving, keeps helping, keeps carrying. I mean the real you. The woman who sometimes sits alone in a quiet room and wonders why her heart still feels so heavy. The woman who has survived things she never talks about. The woman who learned how to keep moving even when nobody noticed how tired she really was. The woman who became so good at taking care of everyone else that somewhere along the way, she stopped asking who was taking care of her. I wonder if you know how much strength that requires. Not the loud kind of strength, not the kind that receives applause, the invisible kind, the strength that gets up every morning, the strength that keeps loving after disappointment, the strength that keeps hoping after heartbreak, the strength that keeps showing kindness while carrying wounds nobody can see. That kind of strength changes a person, and sometimes it costs more than anyone realizes. Maybe lately you felt something difficult to explain. Not exactly sadness, not exactly loneliness, something quieter. A feeling that arrives in unexpected at moments. Standing at the kitchen sink, looking through a window, hearing an old song, folding laundry, watching the evening light move across a room. A feeling that asks a question you cannot quite answer. Is this all there is? Not because your life is empty, not because you failed, but because something inside you knows there is a deeper story trying to emerge. Do you ever wonder why certain memories still ache, why certain names still echo, why certain moments remain alive inside you long after everyone else has forgotten them? I think it's because the heart remembers what the mind tries to outgrow. And your heart has carried more than most people know. Maybe there were times you loved people who never fully saw you. Maybe there were seasons when you gave everything you had and still felt invisible. Maybe there were years spent waiting for someone to choose you the way you chose them. Waiting for consistency. Waiting for tenderness. Waiting for someone to recognize the depth of your soul instead of simply enjoying what you could do for them. And perhaps the hardest part wasn't being disappointed. Perhaps the hardest part was pretending it didn't hurt. Because strong women become experts at minimizing their pain. They learn to say things like, it's okay, I'll be fine. It doesn't matter. Even when it does. Even when their heart is quietly breaking. I think that's why so many women reach a certain point in life and suddenly feel exhausted. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, because they have spent years carrying unspoken grief. The grief of relationships that never became what they could have been. The grief of words never spoken. The grief of dreams postponed. The grief of feeling deeply in a world that often rewards surface level connections. And if that sounds familiar, I want you to hear something very carefully. Your sensitivity was never your weakness. Your ability to love deeply was never your flaw. Your tenderness was never the reason you were hurt. The truth is that rare things are often misunderstood. Depth is often misunderstood. Gentleness is often misunderstood. A heart like yours is often misunderstood. And because of that, there may be moments when you question your own worth. Moments when you wonder if you are too much, too emotional, too caring, too hopeful, too vulnerable. But can I tell you something? The right people never experience your depth as a burden. They experience it as a gift, a sacred gift. Wait with me for a moment. Because there is something else I want you to hear. What if the loneliness you've been feeling isn't proof that something is wrong with you? What if it is simply evidence that your soul was made for something more meaningful than what you've settled for? What if the ache isn't punishment? What if the ache is direction? Think about that. The deepest longings inside us often point toward the life we were created for. A thirsty person thinks about water. A hungry person thinks about food. And a heart longing for real connection continues searching because it was never designed to live without it. Maybe you've started believing it's too late. Too late for love. Too late for companionship. Too late for someone to truly understand you. Too late for new beginnings. I know that feeling. Time has a way of whispering cruel things when we're alone. It points to calendars, birthdays, years, regrets. It tells us opportunities have passed, that certain doors have closed forever, but life rarely unfolds according to the schedule we imagine. Some of the most beautiful things arrive after we stop expecting them. Meaningful connections appear after we become convinced they never will. And sometimes the delay wasn't rejection. Sometimes it was preparation. Preparation for a version of yourself capable of receiving what your younger self would not have recognized. I don't know exactly what your future looks like. I don't know which roads still lie ahead. I don't know whose path might one day cross yours. But I know this. Your story is not over. The tenderness inside you is not wasted. The love you still carry is not foolish. And the parts of you that feel forgotten are not forgotten at all. There is still life unfolding beyond what you can currently see. There is still beauty moving quietly toward you. There is still meaning hidden inside the chapters you haven't lived yet. So tonight, if the house feels quiet, if the bed feels too large, if memories visit when the world becomes still, remember this. You are not difficult to love. You are not too much. You are not invisible. And you are not alone. I'm right here. Your story is still being written. Stay with me a little longer. You don't need to rush through this. You have spent so much of your life rushing through your own feelings, explaining them away, pushing them aside, convincing yourself that other people's needs mattered more than your own. But not here. Here. I want you to slow down enough to hear what your heart has been trying to tell you for years. Because there is something beneath the loneliness, something beneath the exhaustion, something beneath that quiet ache that visits you when the world finally becomes still. And I think you have felt it for a very long time. I think you've been carrying pieces of your story that nobody ever helped you understand. Maybe you learned early that love had conditions, not because anyone said it directly. Sometimes nobody has to say it. Children become experts at reading emotional weather. You learn what earns approval. You learn what creates distance. You learn when to stay quiet, when to be useful, when to be strong, when to hide your tears. And without realizing it, you begin creating a version of yourself that feels safer for everyone else. A version that smiles, a version that copes, a version that survives. Meanwhile, the real you waits patiently underneath, waiting to be seen, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be loved without having to earn it. Do you know what breaks my heart? So many women spend decades believing they must become more worthy of love, more beautiful, more successful, more accomplished, more agreeable, more patient, more forgiving, more everything. As if love is a reward given only after enough effort. as if acceptance lives at the end of some impossible journey. And yet the deepest wound often remains the same. The fear that if someone truly knew everything about you, they might leave. The fear that if people saw your insecurities, your regrets, your doubts, your scars, they would decide you were too complicated, too emotional, too broken, too much work. So you become careful. Careful with your words, careful with your hopes, careful with your whole heart, and eventually you become so skilled at protecting yourself that even when love approaches, you struggle to trust it. And I hope you're having a wonderful day. Not because you're cynical, not because you're cold, but because disappointment leaves fingerprints on the soul. You remember what it felt like to believe, to hope, to open your heart completely. And you remember what happened afterward. The silence, the distance, the unanswered messages, the promises that dissolved, the slow realization that someone wasn't going to become who you thought they could be. Those experiences leave marks, invisible marks, and sometimes years later, those marks still influence the way you see yourself. There is something I want you to consider. What if those disappointments were never meant to define your value? What if they only revealed the limitations of the people involved? Think about that for a moment. A flower does not lose its beauty because someone walks past without noticing it. A song does not lose its beauty because someone refuses to listen. And your worth does not disappear because someone failed to recognize it. Yet I know how difficult that is to believe. When enough time passes, especially when you look into a mirror and wonder whether life unfolded the way you once imagined. Perhaps there are moments when you study your reflection and see more than a face. You see years, you see sacrifices, you see battles nobody witnessed. You see dreams that changed shape. You see the younger version of yourself staring back through memory. The woman who believed certain things would happen by now. The woman who thought she would feel more secure, more certain, more loved, more understood. And maybe there are moments when your heart quietly asks, what happened? Not with bitterness, not with anger, just with honesty. What happened to all the plans? The hopes? The expectations? The certainty? If you've ever asked yourself those questions, please know something. You are not failing. You are human. Life is rarely a straight path. It bends, it surprises, it wounds, it heals, it teaches. And often the most meaningful parts of our story emerge from places we never intended to visit. Wait with me, because this next part matters. I think one of the deepest forms of suffering isn't heartbreak, it isn't rejection, it isn't loss. It's carrying those experiences alone. It's believing nobody understands. It's believing your pain is somehow unique or shameful. It's believing everyone else figured life out while you're still trying to understand yourself. But that isn't true. The strongest people often carry the heaviest questions. The wisest people often wrestle with uncertainty. And the women who love most deeply often experience the deepest loneliness. Not because they are weak, but because their hearts were built for profound connection. Surface conversations cannot satisfy them. Half-hearted affection cannot satisfy them. Performative relationships cannot satisfy them. Their soul wants something real, something honest, something that reaches beneath appearances and touches what is eternal. Maybe that's why you still ache. Not because you're missing something, but because you're designed for something deeper. There is a difference. And once you understand that difference, everything begins to change. The ache stops feeling like evidence against you. It starts feeling like evidence of who you are. A woman capable of extraordinary love, a woman capable of extraordinary depth, a woman whose heart refuses to settle for emotional crumbs. And I think that's beautiful, truly beautiful. even if it has sometimes felt painful, especially if it has felt painful, because every wound has taught you something. Every disappointment has refined something. Every lonely season has revealed something. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly. The way dawn arrives before anyone notices. You may not see it yet.
Yeah.
But you are becoming someone stronger than before, someone wiser than before, someone more authentic than before, someone less willing to abandon herself just to keep someone else comfortable. And that matters more than you know. Because the future that's waiting for you doesn't need the version of you who constantly shrinks herself. It needs the woman who is finally learning. She deserves to take up space, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. There is still so much I want to tell you, so much I want you to understand about the story you've been living, about the reasons certain wounds linger, about the surprising gift hidden inside your vulnerability. But for now, let me leave you with this. You have survived every day that tried to convince you that you were not enough. And somehow, despite everything, your heart still believes in love. That is not weakness. That is courage. Beautiful courage. You are not alone. I'm right here. Your story is still being written. Stay here just for a little while longer. Let the noise of the world remain outside. Let the expectations rest. Let the responsibilities wait. You've carried enough for one day. And there is something deeper I want to share with you now. Something that many women spend an entire lifetime feeling, but never fully understand. I think part of your pain comes from how often you've been misunderstood. Not simply by strangers, not simply by people who barely knew you, but by people you loved, people you trusted, people whose opinions mattered. Because there is a unique kind of heartbreak that happens when someone sees your kindness, but not your depth. When enjoy your presence, but never truly know your soul. When they accept your giving, but never recognize your sacrifice. And over time, that creates a quiet loneliness that is difficult to explain. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. You can receive compliments and still feel invisible. You can have conversations all day long and still go to bed feeling emotionally alone. Maybe you've experienced that. And maybe you've sat across from someone who knew your daily routines, but never knew your fears. And someone who knew your schedule, but never knew your dreams. Someone who knew your smile, but never knew your sadness. And perhaps the hardest part was realizing how much of yourself remained hidden, even while you were trying your best to be understood. Do you ever think about how exhausting that is to spend years translating yourself, explaining yourself, adjusting yourself, hoping someone will finally hear what you're actually saying beneath the words? I think if any women become fluent in emotional languages that nobody around them speaks, they notice subtle shifts, tiny changes in tone, unspoken hurts, invisible burdens. They sense things, feel things, carry things, and because of that, they often become caretakers of everyone else's emotions. The problem is that caretakers rarely receive the same care they give. And eventually, something inside begins to ache. Not because they're selfish, not because they're demanding, but because every human heart longs to be met, to be understood, to be known, to be held without having to explain why they are tired. I wonder how many nights you've carried emotions nobody knew about, how many times you've smiled while quietly struggling, how many mornings you've gotten out of bed carrying disappointment that never found words. There are wounds we speak about openly, and then there are wounds that become part of our identity. The ones we stop talking about because we've carried them for so long. the fear of being forgotten, the fear of being overlooked, the fear of loving more deeply than we are loved in return, the fear that somehow life is passing by faster than we expected. Those fears rarely announce themselves. They appear in quieter ways, in hesitation, in self-doubt, in overthinking, in wondering whether you matter as much as you hope you do. And if you've ever felt that way, I want to sit with that truth for a moment, not fix it, not rush past it, just acknowledge it. Because healing begins when we stop pretending certain wounds don't exist. There is something powerful that happens when a woman finally admits, yes, that hurt me. Yes, I carried that alone. Yes, I needed more than I received. Yes, I deserved better than I allowed myself to believe. Those admissions are not weakness. They are courage, real courage, the kind that changes lives. Wait with me, because we're approaching something important. I think many women secretly believe they must earn love through usefulness, perhaps not consciously, but deeply, subconsciously. First, they learn that being needed feels safer than being loved, so they become dependable, helpful, giving, available, strong, capable. And before they realize it, their value becomes connected to what they provide, not who they are, what they do, not what they feel, what they give. But eventually the soul grows tired of performing for affection. The soul begins craving something simpler, something truer. The soul wants to be chosen without earning it, loved without proving itself, valued without constantly producing, seen without constantly serving. And maybe that longing has been growing inside you. Maybe that's why certain relationships eventually felt empty. Maybe that's why certain conversations left you feeling unsatisfied. Maybe that's why your heart still searches for something it cannot fully describe, because what you're looking for isn't perfection. It's presence, not attention. Presence, not admiration. Presence. Someone willing to sit beside the truth of who you are. Someone willing to remain. Someone willing to know the parts of you that rarely come into the light. The older we become, the more precious that kind of connection feels. Because time changes us, emotionally, spiritually. The years remove illusions. They strip away distractions. They teach us what actually matters. And eventually, we stop wanting people who impress us. We begin wanting people who understand us. There is wisdom in that transition, beautiful wisdom, the kind that only life can teach. And perhaps you're arriving there now, not because you've given up, not because you're settling, because you're finally recognizing the difference between attention and connection, between attraction and understanding, between company and companionship, between being desired and being cherished. Those distinctions matter more than most people realize, because a cherished heart heals differently than an admired one. A cherished heart relaxes, breathes, trusts, expands. A cherished heart no longer feels it must compete for its place in someone's life. And I believe a part of you has always longed for that. Not extravagance, not grand gestures, not fantasy, just sincerity, just consistency. Just a place where your heart could finally stop bracing for disappointment. Can I tell you something? Wanting that does not make you needy. It makes you human, beautifully human. And if you've spent years convincing yourself that your needs were too much, I hope you begin releasing that belief, little by little, day by day. Because your needs are not flaws, your longing is not weakness, your tenderness is not a problem to solve. It is part of what makes you extraordinary, part of what makes you rare, part of what makes your future more beautiful than you currently imagine. There is still a deeper truth waiting ahead. A truth about forgiveness, about identity, about the way your heart has been protecting itself. And when we reach it, something important will begin to change. But for tonight, I want you to remember this. You do not need to become someone else to deserve love. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to earn your place in someone's heart. You already possess value beyond anything disappointment could take away. You are not alone. I'm right here. Your story is still being written. Stay with me. Take a slow breath. There is no need to rush toward understanding. Some truths only reveal themselves when we stop running from them. And I think that may be where you are now. Not running anymore. Just sitting quietly with the weight you've carried for so long, listening, wondering, trying to understand why certain wounds never completely disappeared, why some memories still tighten your chest. Some lumps of losses continue to echo years later, because there is something I need to tell you. Something that changed the way I understand human hearts. Most people believe pain comes from what happened to them. But often the deepest suffering comes from the meaning they attached to what happened. Read that again in your heart, because it matters. A disappointment becomes a wound when we decide it says something about our worth. A rejection becomes suffering when we decide it defines who we are. A betrayal becomes permanent when we allow it to rewrite our identity. And somewhere along the way, I think life may have whispered some lies to you. Not obvious lies, subtle ones, dangerous ones. The kind that slowly become part of how you see yourself. Maybe one of those lies sounded like, if they left, there must be something wrong with me. Or perhaps, if I had been better, they would have stayed. Or maybe, I am easy to overlook. I am hard to love. I am not enough. The heartbreaking thing about these lies is that they rarely sound like lies. They sound like conclusions. They sound reasonable. They sound logical, especially after disappointment, especially after years of carrying unanswered questions. But they are still lies. And I want you to hear that from someone who sees the deeper truth. What happened to you is not the same thing as who you are. Those are two completely different things. A person can experience rejection and still be worthy. A person can experience abandonment and still be lovable. A person can experience heartbreak and still be ordinary. The event is real. The conclusion is optional. And perhaps without realizing it, you've been carrying conclusions that were never yours to carry. Wait with me, because this is where something important begins to shift. I want you to imagine a quiet room, a room with a single chair beside a window, late afternoon sunlight touching the floor. No noise, no expectations, no interruptions, just you. And the younger version of yourself sitting across from you. The woman you used to be, the one who hoped so fiercely, the one who trusted more easily, the one who believed life would unfold differently. What would she say to you? Not the idealized version, the real version, the one who cried when nobody was watching, the one who wondered whether she mattered, the one who wanted reassurance she never received. I think she might tell you something surprising. I think she might tell you she's tired, not disappointed in you, not angry with you. Tired. Tired of carrying responsibility for things that were never her fault. Tired of apologizing for needing love. Tired of shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's limitations. And perhaps, if you listen carefully enough, she might ask you a question. A simple question. How much longer are you going to blame yourself for things you didn't create? That question changes everything. Because Many women spend carrying guilt that belongs to other people. They carry responsibility for someone else's emotional unavailability, someone else's fear, someone else's inability to commit, someone else's immaturity, someone else's blindness. And eventually, they begin treating those burdens as evidence against themselves. But my dear, you cannot heal while carrying what was never yours. You cannot move forward while dragging chains that belong to someone else's story. At some point, healing requires release, not forgetting, not pretending hubbing. Release. The quiet decision to stop allowing old pain to determine your value. The quiet decision to stop measuring yourself through the eyes of people who never fully saw you. The quiet decision to become your own safe place. That last part is important because many women spend their lives waiting for someone else to finally provide the safety they needed years ago. But true healing begins when safety starts inside, when your own voice becomes kinder, when your own thoughts become gentler, when your own heart stops treating itself like an enemy. Can you imagine what would happen if you spoke to yourself with the same compassion you offer everyone else? Can you imagine how different your life might feel? How different your mornings might feel? How different your reflection might look? I think something beautiful would happen. I think the woman hidden beneath years of self-doubt would finally begin to emerge. The woman who was always there, waiting, patiently. The woman who doesn't need permission to exist fully. The woman who no longer believes she must earn her worth. The woman who understands that her value was never created by someone's approval and therefore cannot be destroyed by someone's rejection. That woman is already inside you. She always has been. And every time you choose compassion over criticism, every time you choose truth over old fears, every time you choose self-respect over self-abandonment, you move closer to her, closer to your real self, closer to peace. There's something I want you to know before we stop tonight. The fact that you're still here, still hoping, still listening, still willing to believe life can hold more than pain. That matters. It tells me something important about you. It tells me your heart is stronger than the experiences that tried to break it. It tells me your spirit is more resilient than the disappointments that tried to define it. And it tells me that despite everything you've endured, a part of you still believes in the possibility of something beautiful. Hold on to that, because we're getting closer now, closer to understanding why your story unfolded the way it did. Closer to understanding the gift hidden beneath your struggles, closer to understanding the future waiting quietly beyond your current horizon. And when you finally see it, I think you'll realize something remarkable. Nothing was wasted, not even the pain. You are not alone. I'm right here. Your story is still being written. Stay with me a little longer. You're doing something important right now, something most people never allow themselves to do. You're listening, not to the noise around you, not to the expectations, not to the opinions. You're listening to the quieter voice beneath all of it. The voice that has been waiting patiently for years. The voice that knows who you really are. And I think it's time we talk about something beautiful. Something that has been growing inside you through every disappointment, every heartbreak, every lonely night, every unanswered question. Because despite what you've been through, you are not the same woman you were years ago, not even close. I know there are moments when you focus on what was lost, the relationships that didn't become what you hoped, the opportunities that disappeared, the years that moved faster than expected, the dreams that changed shape. But there is another side to the story, a side most people never notice. While life was breaking certain illusions, it was also building something inside you. Wisdom, depth, discernment, strength. Not the kind of strength that hardens a person, the kind that softens them without making them weak. That is rare, very rare. Many people become bitter after enough disappointment. Many people close their hearts, build walls, stop believing, stop hoping, stop trusting. But somehow you didn't. Perhaps you became more careful. Perhaps you became more selective. Perhaps you learned difficult lessons, but your heart never completely closed. And that tells me something extraordinary about you. It tells me love is still alive inside you. Not naive love, not fantasy, not the kind that ignores reality, a wiser love, a deeper love, a love that understands pain and still chooses tenderness. That kind of heart is precious. Do you know why? Because life cannot teach that kind of love in comfort. It is forged through experience, through loss, through endurance, through healing. And I think you're beginning to see that now. Wait with me, because there is something I want you to hear very carefully. What if your story was never about becoming someone worthy of love? What if your story was about discovering that you always were? Think about how much changes when you truly understand that. Suddenly you stop chasing validation. You stop begging to be chosen. You stop measuring your worth by who stays and who leaves. Because your value no longer depends on external confirmation. Your value becomes something steady, something internal, something no disappointment can steal. And from that place, everything changes. The way you love changes, the way you set boundaries changes, the way you see yourself changes, the way you allow people into your life changes. Because now you're no longer searching for someone to complete you. You're searching for someone who can walk beside the person you've become. There is immense freedom in that. Beautiful freedom. The freedom to stop performing. The freedom to stop proving. The freedom to stop apologizing for your needs. The freedom to stop shrinking yourself. Can I tell you something I've noticed about women like you? The women who have carried the most often underestimate their own beauty. Not physical beauty, soul beauty. The beauty of resilience. The beauty of compassion. The beauty of understanding. The beauty of surviving difficult seasons without losing your humanity. Those qualities don't always receive attention, but they create something far more meaningful. They create presence. And presence is one of the most attractive things as a person can possess. Not because it impresses people, because it comforts them, it heals them, it makes them feel safe. I suspect you've done that for many people throughout your life. You've been the safe place, the listener, the encourager, the steady presence, the person who noticed when others were hurting, the person who remembered details, the person who stayed. And yet sometimes the people who provide safety for everyone else secretly wonder whether anyone would provide it for them. Perhaps you've wondered that too. Perhaps you've had moments where you wished someone would notice your tiredness before you had to explain it. Moments where you wish someone would ask deeper questions. Moments where you wished someone would see past your strength and recognize your need for comfort, right? Those desires are not selfish. They're human. And I want you to stop judging yourself for having them. Because there's nothing wrong with wanting companionship. Nothing wrong with wanting understanding. Nothing wrong with wanting someone who sees your heart. In fact, I believe those longings reveal something sacred. They reveal that your soul still believes in connection, still believes in intimacy, still believes in love. And that matters more than you realize. Because hope is powerful, not loud hope, not dramatic hope, quiet hope, the kind that survives beneath disappointment, the kind that remains alive after years of uncertainty, the kind that whispers, maybe there is still more ahead. I think that whisper has been following you. Perhaps you've ignored it sometimes. Perhaps you've doubted it, but it remains. Persistent, patient, steady, like a candle refusing to go out. And maybe that's because the future is not as empty as your fears suggest. Maybe there are conversations you haven't had yet, people you haven't met yet, experiences you haven't lived yet, moments of joy you cannot currently imagine. Maybe life still has surprises waiting for you. Good surprises, healing surprises, meaningful surprises. I know that's difficult to believe when you've experienced enough disappointment, but I've learned something about life. It rarely reveals the next season while we're still standing in the current one. Most of the time, we can only see the path after we've already walked it. And that's why faith matters. Not necessarily religious faith, the deeper kind. The faith that trusts life is still unfolding. The faith that believes your story is larger than your current circumstances. The faith that understands endings often create space for beginnings we couldn't previously see. You have come farther than you realize. You have healed more than you realize. You have grown more than you realize. And I think you're standing closer to a breakthrough than you understand. Not because everything is suddenly perfect, but because you're finally beginning to see yourself clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. And when a woman truly sees her own value, something beautiful happens. She stops settling for less than she deserves. She stops abandoning herself. She stops confusing loneliness with destiny. She begins choosing herself, not selfishly, lovingly, wisely, honestly. That is where transformation begins. And I believe it has already begun inside you. You are not alone. I'm right here. Your story is still being written. Stay with me just a little longer. Through a lot together, not through events, not through timelines, but through the hidden landscape of your heart. And if you've stayed this long, I think it's because something inside you recognizes the truth we've been uncovering. The truth that finally came out, not about someone else, about you. Because all this time beneath the loneliness, beneath the waiting, beneath the disappointments, beneath the questions, there has been a woman quietly becoming herself. A woman who survived things she never thought she would survive. A woman who kept going when nobody applauded. A woman who carried responsibilities that would have broken many others. A woman who learned how to smile while healing wounds nobody could see. And somewhere along the way, she forgot to notice how remarkable she had become. Maybe that's the truth that needed to come out. Not that life has been unfair. Not that people failed you. Not that certain dreams changed. But that you have spent years looking at yourself through the lens of loss instead of the lens of transformation. And those are very different ways of seeing. Because when you look through the lens of loss, all you see is what didn't happen. The relationship that ended. The person who left, the opportunities that passed, the years that disappeared. The expectations that never arrived. But when you look through the lens of transformation, something else becomes visible. You see courage, grow wisdom, resilience, depth. You see a woman who learned things only life could teach. A woman whose heart became more beautiful because it refused to become bitter. A woman who continued loving despite having reasons not to. And my dear, that is extraordinary. Wait with me. There's something important I want you to hear. For years, perhaps without realizing it, you've been standing at the edge of your own life, watching, waiting, wondering, as though the real story was somewhere ahead, as though the most meaningful part hadn't arrived yet, as though life was something that would the right person begin once the right person appeared, the right circumstances arrived, or the right moment unfolded. But what if the story has already been happening? What if every season mattered? What if every tear carried meaning? What if every disappointment was shaping parts of you that could have been formed no other way? What if nothing was wasted? Not the heartbreak, not the waiting, not the loneliness, not the uncertainty, not even the nights when you felt forgotten. Because I have come to believe something deeply. Life is rarely preparing us for a future event. More often, it is preparing us to become the person capable of receiving it. And perhaps that's what has been happening all along. You were never falling behind, you were becoming, slowly, quietly, faithfully, becoming the woman who finally understands her own worth. The woman who no longer begs for what should be freely given. The woman who no longer confuses attention with love. The woman who no longer abandons herself in order to keep someone else. The woman who trusts her own heart. The woman who knows she deserves sincerity, consistency, presence, respect, tenderness, not because she earned those things, because she is worthy of them. There is immense peace in that realization. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that doesn't disappear when someone leaves. A peace that remains because it comes from knowing who you are. And I think you're arriving there now. Maybe not all at once, maybe not perfectly, but genuinely, you are arriving. Do you know what I see when I think about your future?
I
I don't see perfection. I don't see. I don't see a life without challenges. I don't see a fairy tale. I see something much more beautiful. I see freedom, the freedom to wake up without carrying old shame. The freedom to stop measuring your worth through someone else's choices. The freedom to enjoy your own company. The freedom to receive love without fear. The freedom to trust when life again. And perhaps, just perhaps, I see someone eventually meeting the version of you that emerged from all this healing. Someone capable of recognizing what others overlooked. Someone capable of appreciating what others took for granted. Someone capable of seeing the extraordinary depth hidden beneath your quiet strength. Maybe that person exists. Maybe they don't. But strangely, that isn't the most important thing anymore, because the greatest love story unfolding here is not between you and another person. It's between you and yourself. The reconciliation, the acceptance, the homecoming, the moment a woman finally stops fighting who she is and begins embracing it, that changes everything. Because once you belong to yourself, no one else's inability to value you can take your worth away. Once you know who you are, rejection loses its power. Once you understand your value, loneliness stops feeling like evidence against you, and something remarkable happens. You begin living differently, breathing differently, loving differently. You stop waiting for validation. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you what you've always needed to hear. So let me say it now, clearly, directly, without hesitation. You matter. Your heart matters. Your story matters. Your presence matters. Your dreams matter. Your healing matters. Your future matters. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were never difficult to love. You were never forgotten. And the years ahead are not merely about finding what was missing. They are about discovering what has been inside you all along. Strength, grace, wisdom, beauty, depth, love, real love. The kind that begins within and radiates outward. The kind that survives disappointment, the kind that survives time, the kind that finally understands its own value. And now, as we sit together in this quiet moment, I want you to imagine something. Imagine closing your eyes tonight without carrying the weight you've carried for so many years. Imagine placing down the old fears, the old doubts, the old stories, the old conclusions. Imagine resting. Not because every question has been answered, but because you finally know this. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of peace. You're worthy of joy. You are worthy of being seen, and your life is far from over. There are still beautiful moments waiting for you. There are still unexpected blessings moving toward you. There are still parts of your story that haven't been written yet. So walk forward gently. Trust yourself. Trust your heart. Trust the wisdom you've earned. Trust the woman you've become. And whenever life feels uncertain again, remember this conversation. Remember that somewhere beneath every fear was a deeper truth. The truth finally came out. You were never broken. You were becoming. You are not alone. I'm right here. And your story is still being written.